Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the CTERA Cloudian IO Forum webcast. Thank you for joining us today. We will be discussing cloud solutions for always-on robo data protection. And joining us today, we have David Glow, Senior Systems Engineer from Cloudian. Good morning, David.
Morning, Laura. How are you?
Good, good. And we've got Joshua Eddy, Director of Marketing at CTERA, on as well. Good morning, Joshua. How are you doing today?
Good morning. Looking forward to chatting today.
Great. And just to let everybody know, we are recording this, so it will be available later if you can't attend the whole thing. We will be taking questions at the end. So as we're going through, if you have a question about the materials, feel free to go ahead and type it into the Q&A box, and we'll take those at the end. And with that, we'll go over a quick agenda. So we'll be covering why S3 matters, the Cloudian Hyperstore solution, benefits of a hybrid cloud, and then Cloudian and CTERA solution. And with that, I will hand it over to David. And David, take it away.
Great. So once again, I am David Glow. I'm a systems engineer for Cloudian out of the Midwest. And I'm going to give you a real brief introduction to Cloudian. After I get control. Oh, there we go. So who is Cloudian, right? We are a software-defined scale-out object storage system. What that means is that it's a node-based approach. So each node has CPU, cache, gigi ports, and spinning disks. So you get the benefits of scale-out architecture, meaning that every time you add a node, you're not only increasing capacity, you're also increasing performance. Hyperstore is the platform that we developed it on, and it's built to scale. You can see a couple customers there, NTT, which has 30+ petabytes in deployment, and Nifty, which has 3,500 multi-tenant enterprise customers. So once again, it's been tested by enterprise customers that expect reliability. On top of that, we are one of the only vendors out there today that is 100% S3 compliant. What does that mean? That means that Amazon or AWS produces an API that allows you to access the storage. There's hundreds of advanced API calls. Some could be multi-part upload or versioning. We are 100% compatible with that. What that means is that if you have any applications today that you are using in AWS S3, it's as simple as changing the endpoint to point to an on-prem Cloudian device, and it should work. On top of that, we partner with many partners out there today, including CTERA, that offer an S3 offering where you can get all the benefits of a scale-out object store at a very economical price. And then we roll a whole bunch of enterprise features in with Hyperstore itself, right? Everything you'd expect. So you could do erasure coding on your buckets or replication factor. We offer compression, encryption, multi-tenancy, as I said before. We could be geo-distributed, so you could deploy us in a number of data centers to give you a very high level of redundancy. And then we also have policy-based tiering, which makes us be a hybrid cloud, right, or a hybrid object store. That means that you could take content from us and tier it off to any S3 compatible device. And then it's a fully distributed architecture, right? So it's based on Cassandra, so all nodes are running Cassandra, so that as you distribute your objects out across multiple data centers or multiple nodes, every node knows where the objects live, so you can connect to any node to execute a read or a write. Next slide. So let's just take a step back here before we jump into Cloudian and talk a little bit about what object storage is, right? So if you're familiar with storage, there was originally block storage or SAN storage, and then in the 90s, NAS came out, right? Network attached storage. That had a file system, right? So there was folders, there were structures, things that you had to traverse to get to your files. Object storage is actually just a flat file system, right? You might hear objects called blobs. And the way this works is that it's actually the objects are stored in a bucket, right? So there's no concept of a directory, and they're all stored in buckets. And then user access is controlled by those buckets. So you determine who gets access to your objects, who doesn't get access. And once again, because it's a flat file system, it takes away some of the complexities that you'd have associated with file systems like network attached storage, where you have to do a tree walk. And it also makes it highly searchable. So you can do a lot of things with metadata that allow you to search against the objects. So once again, remember, object storage is really built to scale, to house billions of objects, and to be easy to deploy. So what is Amazon S3, right? So by default, it is their object offering, right? So you'll hear S3. That is the public object offering that Amazon has. They also have Glacier, which they would call a lower tier of object storage. But you also hear S3 more and more now defined as a protocol, right? So I say, do you have an S3 connector? Do you speak S3? So it's evolved to actually a standard now, right? So AWS is or S3 is the standard today for object. 97% of objects stored today utilize the S3 API calls. It's highly flexible, and as you can see at the slide or the diagram on the right there, it's taken off dramatically over the last 5 to 6 years. There's over 5 trillion objects stored in AWS today, and you can see that arrow is just going straight up. So once again, why is that? It's because there's a large demand for unstructured data. 80% of the new data that's being generated today is unstructured. So let's talk a little bit about why S3 compatibility matters, right? If you're going to get into a platform, you're going to want to do something that's going to be supported widely, right? And S3, as I mentioned before, is the de facto standard today for object. As you can see below, there's a small example of some of the partners today, but at the end of the day, what they're all doing is they all speak S3. Some of them are doing it for file services, some of them are doing it for backup, some of them are doing it for data analytics. But once again, there's a wide variety of vendors today that are all getting into S3, and most of them are looking at this from a hybrid approach. And when I say hybrid, I mean you have the ability to deploy a Cloudian device on-prem in your own data center. It acts just like it would if you were going to S3, except you're not traversing the internet and you're actually controlling the hardware and the software. But you may want to utilize some of the benefits of S3 maybe for archive. So that's why when we say hybrid, you have the ability to actually archive out, tier out to any S3 compatible device, whether it's Google or whether it's AWS. So this slide here looks almost similar to that slide I showed you for S3, right, with the 5 trillion objects. And really what it's showing you is that, the data is doubling almost on a yearly basis here, and it's not, getting any smaller. If you look at today what's happening between the Internet of Things, where sensors and devices are generating thousands and billions of objects, social media, everybody's taking pictures and posting them up, as well as just enterprise data, right? So all these things are just generating, ridiculous amounts of data, and you need a file system or an object store that could scale, right, to handle that. You need something that's going to be easy to deploy, easy to manage, easy to scale. And that's the problem that we're going after, right? And Cloudian is the solution that we are proposing. A couple key points that I mentioned before. It's think of it as AWS S3 on-prem, your own private cloud. Allows you to start small and scale to thousands of nodes. So once again, it's built to scale, and we give you the ability also to have tiering into any public cloud. So let's talk a little bit about the solution itself. You can start as little as 3 nodes and scale to thousands of nodes. If you look on the left there, it's a peer-to-peer architecture. That's a 6-node Hyperstore cluster that you're looking at. They're all peers to each other. They're all running a version of Cassandra on each node, and what that means is that you can connect to any one of those nodes to read or write your data. Once again, we give you the ability to start small, as little as 3 nodes, scale to thousands of nodes. You can add 1 node at a time, you press a button, you walk away. So you don't have to worry about managing your data, moving objects from one node to another. It's all automatically balanced in the background. And then our tagline is always on. What that means is that once you deploy Cloudian, especially in a multi-data center environment, you could actually lose an entire data center and still have full access to your data. Never have to take an outage, whether it's adding storage, removing storage, or doing upgrades. So it's built to scale and be highly reliable. So let's talk a little bit about the ability to be able to do distributed data. Just picture this as a 3 data center deployment where you'd have a minimum of 3 Hyperstore nodes in each data center. That gives you the ability to lose a data center and still have full access to your content. You could set flexible consistency levels to address latency. So you can have an eventual consistency where the objects that are being replicated, say from the central region to your western and eastern region, would have an eventual consistency, which would give you a better performance or a better end user experience. Allows you to address the issues of latency. But once again, this is built to scale, built for reliability. Just think about always on when we're talking about this. So a couple different ways you could deploy Cloudian. You could go software only, where it's based on commodity x86 based hardware. So you could deploy. We give you the hardware requirements. You could purchase the software and deploy it on your own hardware. We also offer an appliance. So we have 2 different appliances that I'll talk about soon that allow you to deploy an all-in solution where we supply the hardware and the software. And then we are also sold on Amazon's marketplace. So you can actually purchase the software, deploy it on your own hardware, and then you just get a bill from Amazon that would include your usage for Hyperstore. From a feature perspective, as I mentioned before, we are the only object store out there today that is 100% S3. So what that means is that we speak native S3. We don't have any type of connector or translator. The advantage there is that you can be guaranteed that if you're using any one of the S3 APIs, it will work on Hyperstore. We also have tool sets built in for multi-tenancy, quality of service, and billing. So if you were going to deploy this in an architecture where you wanted multiple tenants to use a single Hyperstore box, you have the ability to segregate out their data in different buckets. You have quality of service that's built in that will allow you to throttle, whether it's on an IO per second or objects per second. And then there's billing as well, so you can set default rating plans and then generate a report at the end of the month that you get sent to your users. As I mentioned before, we do have policy-based replication, so you could just determine if you want to tier something to AWS or Google based on the number of days since the object was last accessed, after a specified calendar date, or the number of days since the object was created. So once again, that's where we get into the hybrid ability to be able to tier off to other S3 compatible devices. Because we utilize Cassandra, you have the ability to do custom metadata tagging at ingest. So what that allows you to do is you could, if you're ingesting images, you could put dates, times, anything that you want to search against, and then using Elasticsearch, you can search against it, right? Because if you're going to have a object store that's going to scale to billions of objects, you're going to have some way of being able to search against it so you understand what your data is. And then we partner with companies like CTERA to provide file access as well, where we are the back end on it as an object store. So the appliances themselves, as you can see here, we offer 2. We offer our HSA 1500 appliance. That's a 1U appliance with 12 drives. The size of them will determine how much capacity you have. So we offer 4 terabytes, 8 terabytes, and 10 terabytes. What that means is that when you deploy a solution, you're either going to have a 48, 96, or 120 terabyte node. From there, as you add additional nodes, you'd be scaling in one of those denominations. On the right, you see the HSA 4000. That's actually a 4U platform that has 2 nodes in that one 4U chassis. And that comes in either 8 terabytes or 10 terabyte nodes. So you're going to be coming out of the gate there at either 560 or 700 terabytes raw. So what we really do here is give you an option, right? We typically will ask you, how much capacity do you need today? How much capacity do you think you're going to need in 12 months? And how fast do you need your object store to go? And based off of that, we'll guide you towards one of these appliances. If you say that you were going to start off with a half a petabyte and by the end of the year you'd be at 2 petabytes, we're probably going to guide you to the HSA 4000 because it'll require less hardware to get you to that usable number. Then this here is just really a comparison. As I mentioned before, we are 100% S3 compatible. We support all the S3 API calls. What that means is that we're pretty much identical to a public cloud, with the exception of it resides in your data center, and we give you the ability hybrid out or tier out to S3. If you look at some of the other features, right, as I mentioned before, it's scalable. You press a button, you walk away. It's always on. The data protection is in there. You can determine whether you want to use a replication factor to protect your objects or erasure coding. You can access it from anywhere. And what's really nice is you get to pay as you grow. So once you deploy 3 nodes, you can add as many nodes as you want after that. So once again, you can pay for what you need today and then scale from there. And then this last slide here, I just wanted to show you a use case for us, right? So one of the lowest hanging fruits for object stores today is backup. If you look on the left, right, those are probably the traditional ways of doing backup that you're probably familiar with. One is going from an appliance to spinning disk and then possibly tearing that off to another offsite. Usually pretty costly, right? Especially because those appliances are usually loaded up with SSDs and spinning disk. Tape, right? A lot of issues going on with tape today. Number one is most people require you to store it off-site. The other issue is that, tape devices don't last forever. Tape doesn't last forever, and the devices themselves. So if you had something where you had a 7-year hold, legal hold, or 10-year hold, there's no guarantee that that tape device that you have is going to be functional. So, if you look at Cloudian, where we fit in, and this is an example with CTERA and their backup agent, they're actually acting as a backup agent, doing dedupe and compression, and using us as that back-end store, right, the back-end object store. So we're that larger data store where you can store all your objects, whether it's on-prem or whether you want to tier off for a longer-term archive, whether it be to Glacier S3 or GCP. But once again, just think about us as a low-cost, reliable back-end target that can be used for archive. And with that, I will hand it back.
Thank you, David. Joshua is up next.
All right, thanks, guys. So Dave's gave a great overview of the Cloudian storage tier. And you might be asking yourself, well, what is the best use for this storage tier? Object storage is pretty new for a lot of folks, and they don't know exactly what's the best use for it. And that's why CTERA is very excited about working with Cloudian, because we provide an application that makes best use of the characteristics inherent to Cloudian. You're looking for something that matches the right price and performance and resiliency and privacy characteristics of that storage tier. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we're seeing in the market and why it makes a lot of sense to consider this Cloudian CTERA joint solution. So what we're seeing, just speaking generally about the market, is that the cloud, and cloud storage in particular, is changing how every organization is dealing with user file storage and user file collaboration and office storage and data protection. All of these things are up for consideration. In the past, organizations would use NAS or content management or different file servers or even tape backup at all these different locations, but they're being turned upside down by the new capabilities that are brought by cloud storage. This is CTERA's focus, is transforming these applications into cloud integrated services that change the economics and change the service levels that IT can provide to customers, to end users. And this is actually a $15 billion market being turned upside down by the cloud. Now, just to give a little quick history lesson that you've probably seen is that for cloud file services, services like YouSendIt or Dropbox, people started using these individually at work. And people would bring them, self-service SaaS capabilities in 2013. But around 2010, around 2013, IT got involved with SaaS applications like Box and Dropbox, launching support for Active Directory, and IT departments could ensure that the files didn't leave with the employee, but they really still didn't have total control, and it was very departmental or smaller deployments. And today, what we're seeing, starting last year, is that tools for file storage and sharing that used to be consumer-oriented are now being deployed across the enterprise, and IT is looking for a solution that is flexible and completes all the capabilities that the different departments and the different users and different use cases need. As well, addressing the appropriate privacy concerns and security concerns is very critical, right? So what we're seeing in terms of a survey we did for IT is that people who are looking to use the cloud are using it for these purposes, for file storage, backup, app deployment, app dev test, mobility, and collaboration. And CTERA addresses 4 of the top 6 drivers for organizations starting their cloud computing journey. So we are often the solution that customers choose when they want to make their journey to the cloud. And joining up with Cloudian to be a really great start for adopting an object storage, cloud storage type technology makes a ton of sense. And that's because CTERA takes this Cloudian software-defined storage that supports multi-tenancy and is truly a private deployment, and turns it into a file services platform for end users where they can store their files, where they can sync their files between devices, where they can share files internally and externally, where they can use Cloudian for data protection and retention purposes, as well as governance of checking, making sure that that we have track the access of and limit permissions appropriately. And we do this using Cloudian across endpoints like laptops and mobile devices, offices like file servers at remote offices or branch offices, as well as servers, whether those servers be on-prem, in a remote office, or in the cloud. So to drill down a little bit more specifically about the use cases, CTERA is the only platform that provides a full continuum of file services that are cloud-based and targeted for large enterprise organizations. So I'll mention enterprise file sync and collaboration. This is something that you might think of like Dropbox or Box, but truly designed to be a private Dropbox or a private box where it's deployed on-prem, you have full total control, and you're not giving up any of the security or privacy concerns that there is with SaaS. We also provide file servers that run at remote offices and connect back to the cloud. So you have now cloud integrated NAS, as well as cloud disaster recovery for those NASs, where users can access those files in case the file server goes down. We also provide backup for your Office file servers, for your endpoints, as well as for any servers that happen to be running in the cloud. So there's no other product out there or no other platform out there that provides this breadth of capabilities all on the same platform. And what makes it really useful is that all of this stuff is under a single point of control. It is running on your Cloudian storage, and we've deduped the data so it minimizes the cost, and it also is managed from a central point. All of your endpoints, all of the what we call gateways, those file servers, as well as all of the file sync and share, has a single interface for managing it across all of them. And so it's also designed to be scalable. We support deployments that have tens of thousands of users, if not hundreds of thousands of users. It's designed to be multi-tenant, so even it's designed so that service providers can use it to sell to maybe smaller businesses, but it's also designed for, in that sense, for companies that are trying to provide IT as a service and are looking to use a internal service provider model, which is very popular right now. And of course, we're API driven, so it's a fully automated system. And on the privacy stuff, just like Cloudian is bringing the cloud into your data center, CTERA is deployed 100% inside the firewall. So you're not exposing your unstructured data, which can be contracts or legal documents, or it can be financial information. None of these things have to be put out onto a public cloud. So you can get all the benefits, the end user experience that people are looking for without sacrificing the security or the privacy that you would have with a public cloud. And finally, of course, we have very tight integrations with Active Directory and governance. And just to give an example of the types of customers that are deploying this solution, these are generally global 2000 type organizations, but we do serve other large enterprises. For example, you'll notice AXA Insurance or AXA Financial, the largest financial organization in Europe. We'll see the Carlyle Group, which is the largest private equity firm in the world. The Department of Defense, their premier IT department, has selected CTERA to provide their file sync and share for, because of its security and because of its usability. So you'll see a lot of other companies here that are concerned about security and privacy and hold us to a very high standard, like Santander Bank, one of the largest banks in the world. And what's a good one also? And you'll see a number of other uses, like the state of Texas has standardized on CTERA for both file storage at remote offices, as well as for file sync and share across various departments, whether it's the health department and others. So to give you an idea for how this is accomplished, there are 3 layers I'll talk about. The first layer you'll see on the right-hand side is that storage layer provided here by Cloudian as a private cloud, or even as a managed private cloud if you'd like some assistance with that. And that's where all the data comes in and is stored as the back end. And we love Cloudian because it is so scalable, because it is a very easy S3 compliant backend storage for us to use. Because it scales so well, and because it supports multi-tenancy. These are all things that are really important to us and to our customers. It really costs, changes the way that things cost when you look at, traditional storage like NAS or SAN. Object storage provides the right price and performance for the types of uses we're talking about here. If you've got end users accessing files, you don't need a heavy-duty NAS necessarily, or if you're using backup, then object storage provides a really good price point for that, as well as the resiliency and the scalability and the retention capabilities that you need for doing that. So Cloudian is a really great choice as your backend to run CTERA on top of. The next layer will be that CTERA portal. This is kind of the brains of the operation. It's not just a user interface, but it's the middleware that orchestrates data movement, whether it's from the endpoints to the cloud or from one user to another user when sharing. The portal is the kind of the orchestrator. And it's also where it plugs into stuff like Active Directory. It plugs into other API-driven automation systems like a Puppet. And you can tie in billing or monitoring or even antivirus systems to use it however you're used to using all of your enterprise files. And on the left-hand side, the entire layer of different ways that end users interact with our system. The first set of layers, the first set I'll say, are these CTERA gateways. These are NAS file servers, and essentially that can run as a virtual appliance. And they provide the CIFS, SMB, NFS, even FTP capabilities if you want, for remote offices to continue to use their their legacy experiences for accessing files, but syncing it back to the portal. The endpoints agents also sync up to the portal, and the server agents do backup. So you're looking at a system that provides a bunch of different use cases, whether it's storing for the offices, syncing your files at endpoints, as well as backing up files all in one platform, which no one else does. So with that, I wanted to leave a couple minutes for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Joshua. And I just want to give a shout out to IO Firm. They also participated with us in this. They are a provider of secure data solutions that focus on the cloud and multi-site implementations. They've been working with CTERA and Cloudian for a number of years, implementing solutions, and we're really thankful to have them with us as well. And with that, we will get to questions. Okay. Are you 100% S3? What do you do when the client's file system is not S3 ready?
I'm not
I'm
sure.
sorry, Lori, could
Directed at,
you repeat that question?
Yeah. As you are 100% S3, what do you do when the client's file system is not S3 ready?
Well, typically you have to use some type of middleware then that will allow you to do some type of translation. So there's several partners out there that we work with that could take a file that may be, you know, NFS based or SMB based and do some type of translation and then store it on us on the back end. But once again, the only requirement we have as an object store is that you do speak S3.
Great. How is this better than Box or Dropbox for sharing files?
I think that's for me. So Box and Dropbox are good at file sync and share capabilities, right? But they are a public solution. And so every single user, every single tenant that logs in, every single integration that Box makes with other third parties is a risk. And so you've got a very large surface area for attacks. So you've got a security vulnerabilities here where you've got lots and lots of customers and users all accessing this public system, as well as lots and lots of integrations, each one increasing your risk. So from the security side, that's one concern. The other would be privacy. There are a lot of regulations that governments have put in place about where your data can be stored, who can access it, and where the data can be moved. And so by having by using a public deployment like a OneDrive or a Box or something like that, then you cannot have a lot of control over where that data is stored or where that data flows through. So a lot of European companies, for example, would not be able to use a Box because of EU privacy regulations. And they just can't store the data in certain other countries. With a CTERA deployment, it is 100% private, and you have full control over where that information is stored, right? You can deploy your Cloudian in multiple locations, have multiple sites, and tie them together, and thus control exactly what data goes where and where it's stored. The third answer would be Box and Dropbox only do file sync and share, and then the ability to actually tie in legacy use cases like NAS is not part of them. So if you've got people who are using NAS with certain files, you have to add another system with Box that has a different set of permissions and is not necessarily connected to your legacy interaction and uses. And whereas CTERA unifies all of these things, both the NAS, the EFSS, as well as the backup.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, we've got another question here. Where is the CTERA portal running? Does it require its own hardware and storage, or do you run it on a Cloudian Hyperstore node?
The CTERA portal runs typically nearby the storage. I do recommend having its own server, its own virtual server if it need be. So it would typically run near the storage. However, we do have some customers who have deployed the portal on-premise, and the metadata remains on-premise, but they want to take advantage of the costs associated with object storage or the ease of and flexibility of deployment in a public cloud approach or a hosted approach. So they could deploy the Cloudian in a more hosted location and have the object storage with all the data stored somewhere else separate from the metadata.
Thank you. And let's see, we've got a couple more here. What types of policy-based migration to public cloud are supported with Cloudian?
Sure. So you have basically 3 lifecycle rules that can be configured, right? The first one would be the number of days since the object was created. Second one would be the number of days since the object was last accessed. And then the third one would be just after a date that you specify, right? In addition to that, there are behaviors that you could define when you do tier things off to a public cloud. So you could define, if you want to recall one of those objects that have been tiered out, you could define it as a stream where it's automatically just going to get streamed directly to the end user right through the Cloudian Hyperstore device. You could redirect the client to that public cloud where they'd enter their own credentials to pull down the content. And then last way would be just where you require a restore, where at a set period it would get restored back onto Cloudian. So you can define not only the lifecycle rule for when it goes out to a public cloud, but also the behavior when you want to call it back.
Great, thank you. Okay, does CTERA do encryption at rest and encryption in flight?
In fact, we take it a level beyond that. You know, a lot of companies out there tout that they'll do encryption at rest and encryption in flight of their files, but if you think about it, that means that there's a gap between flight and at rest. So once the data has been received by the server or the service, it gets decrypted after being in flight, and then you have clear text being processed, and then it's re-encrypted and stored on the storage encrypted. But during that gap, that's an exposure. The way that CTERA approaches this is we actually encrypt at the endpoint, and we never decrypt throughout its entire life cycle till when it's all the way through to the storage. So we encrypt it at the end, transmit it, and we actually wrap it with another encryption when we transmit it. We remove that outer layer of encryption and store the encrypted data.
Great, and we've got time for one last question. I know we're running a little over, but we had quite a few questions come in. If we don't get to your questions, we'll follow up with you afterwards. The last question is for Dave. Dave, in the last slide where it shows the CTERA Cloudian solution, is Cloudian sort of used like data domain for on-prem storage, with the expectation being that with data domain, it typically replicates to another data domain where Cloudian syncs to the cloud?
Sure. So we could be, we wouldn't be a replacement for data domain, but in a data domain environment, if you were going to want a second copy, in other words, replicate to a second data domain, we could be that secondary target where data domain has the ability to move content via S3 to an S3 certified device. So we could be that secondary deployment, which obviously is going to be much cheaper than buying an actual data domain device, correct? Right?
Awesome. Okay. All right. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Special thanks to Dave and Joshua for presenting today with all the great material. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We both CTERA and Cloudian offer free trials. All the information is up here. And like I said, we did record this, so we will have this recording available later today or early this week. So thank you, Joshua. Thank you, David. Have a great day, everybody.